The chandelier
It's
light
going to be
fractured
okay.
against the diamond
I
flute
can't
in
do
Julian's
this.
hand,
We have to keep
casting
moving.
a kaleidoscope of arrogant sparkles across
It's going
the
to be
ballroom.
okay.
Elena
We're here.
stood near the velvet
We need to
drapes,
move. The press is
watching
everywhere.
her husband of 15 years laugh.
It's
It
going to
wasn't
be
a warm
okay.
laugh.
We
It was
need
the
to
sharp,
move.
metallic
Now.
sound of a
Yes,
man
ma'am.
who believed
He's
he
with
owned
me.
the room and everyone in it. He wasn't laughing with her. He was laughing with Sienna. Sienna Cross, the company's newly appointed director of public relations, wore a dress that cost more than the average employee's yearly salary. She stood too close to Julian, her hand resting possessively on his forearm, her eyes scanning the room like a predator, ensuring no one dared to challenge her territory. The tabloids had already begun the whispers. They called Elena the grey ghost of Thorne Dynamics, the quiet, aging wife who had faded into the background while Julian became the tech messiah of the decade. "You look tired, Elle," a voice said. Elena turned to see Marcus, an old friend and the only person in the room who knew the truth about the early days of the company. "I am just observing, Marcus," Elena replied, her voice steady. "Physics teaches us that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Julian is creating a lot of action tonight. He's going to announce the separation soon," Marcus warned, lowering his voice. "He's been moving assets. He thinks you're going to roll over and take the beach house and the hush money." Elena took a sip of her sparkling water. She looked at Julian, who was now whispering something into Sienna's ear that made her throw her head back in performative delight. They thought they were being subtle. They thought Elena was just the woman who raised the children and hosted the dinner parties. They had forgotten who wrote the original code that made Thorne Dynamics possible. They had forgotten that before she was a wife, she was an architect of systems. "Let him move the assets," Elena said softly. "It leaves a trail." Later that night, the confrontation happened exactly as she had predicted. Julian came home smelling of expensive perfume and scotch. He found Elena sitting in the library, reading a book on forensic accounting, though the cover was hidden by a dust jacket of a classic novel. "We need to talk," Julian said, loosening his tie. He didn't look at her, he looked at his reflection in the window. "I'm unhappy, Elena. I have been for years. I found someone who understands the direction I'm taking the company. Someone who matches my energy." "Sienna," Elena stated. It wasn't a question. Julian paused, irritated by her lack of surprise. "Yes. Sienna. She's vital to the future. And frankly, you and we've drifted. I've had the lawyers draw up a settlement. It's generous. More than you need." He slid a thick manila envelope across the mahogany desk. It stopped inches from her hand. "I want this done quietly," he added, his tone sharpening. "No drama. No dragging my name through the mud. You sign, you get the house in the Hamptons and a monthly stipend, and you walk away." Elena looked at the envelope. She didn't open it. She stood up, smoothing the fabric of her skirt. Her face was a mask of perfect calm, hiding the storm of calculation firing behind her eyes. "I will have my lawyer review it," she said. "You don't need a lawyer, Elena," Julian scoffed. "It's standard. Don't make this difficult. You know you can't win against me. I am Thorne Dynamics." Elena walked to the door, pausing just before she exited. She looked back at him, a man who had built a kingdom on the foundation she had poured, and who was now trying to evict her from it. "Good night, Julian," she said. She went to her room, but she didn't sleep. Instead, she opened her laptop and logged into a secure server she hadn't touched in a decade. The interface was old, but the access key still worked. She wasn't just a scorned wife. She was the creator who had been locked out of her own creation. And she was about to initiate a system reset. The weeks following the separation were a masterclass in public relations manipulation, orchestrated entirely by Sienna. She didn't just want Julian, she wanted his narrative. Every magazine cover and tech blog featured the new era of Thorne Dynamics. They painted Julian as the visionary genius finally unburdened by a traditional, old-fashioned home life, and Sienna as the modern muse fueling his second wind. Elena became a ghost in her own city. When she went to the grocery store or the dry cleaners, people offered pitying glances. They whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, calling her poor Elena or the discarded wife. They saw a woman who had lost her husband to a younger, shinier model. They had no idea that while Sienna was busy curating Instagram posts about power couples, Elena was dissecting 12 years of financial records. She sat in a small, dimly lit office in the back of a brick building in the financial district. Across from her sat Mr. Hideo, a forensic accountant known for finding money that didn't want to be found. He wasn't flashy like Julian's lawyers. He was precise, quiet, and dangerous. "You were right, Mrs. Vance," Hideo said, sliding a tablet across the metal desk. "Julian has been diverting dividends into a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands for 3 years. He calls it Project Horizon. He lists it as R&D expenses on the company books, but the money isn't being spent on research. It's sitting there, accumulating interest." Elena looked at the numbers. They were staggering. Julian wasn't just leaving her, he was trying to rob the marital estate before the divorce papers were even signed. He assumed Elena wouldn't understand the complex ledger entries labeled as server maintenance or cloud infrastructure expansion. He assumed she was financially illiterate. "He thinks he's hidden it under operating costs," Elena murmured, her finger tracing the column of figures. But looking at the server logs, the traffic during those months didn't justify this spend. "It's a phantom expense." "Precisely," Hideo nodded, a rare spark of admiration in his eyes. "Most spouses wouldn't catch the discrepancy in server load versus cost." "How did you know?" "I built the server architecture, Mr. Hideo," Elena said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I know exactly how much it costs to run. Julian forgets that he sells the product, but I created the container it lives in." Meanwhile, Julian was growing impatient. He sent emails through his lawyers, pressuring Elena to sign the initial settlement. He threatened to cut off her access to the joint accounts, trying to starve her into submission. He wanted the divorce finalized before the company's IPO of their new AI division, ensuring Elena wouldn't get a cut of the new billions he expected to make. Elena didn't respond to the threats. She didn't give interviews to defend herself against the rumors Sienna planted about her being cold or unsupportive. She maintained a terrifying, calculated silence. She knew that if she spoke now, she might tip her hand. She needed Julian to feel safe. She needed him to feel like he had already won. Because a man who thinks he has won stops watching his back. The conference room at the law firm was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and expensive leather. It was designed to intimidate. Julian sat at the head of the table, flanked by 3 lawyers in charcoal suits. Sienna wasn't allowed in the deposition, but her presence was felt in Julian's new haircut and the aggressive posture he adopted, a posture she had likely coached him on. Elena sat opposite him, accompanied only by her lawyer, Sarah, a sharp-witted woman who specialized in intellectual property rather than just family law. Julian hadn't noticed that detail yet. "Mr. Vance," Sarah began, the camera recording the deposition humming softly in the corner. "We are here to establish the division of assets. You have stated in your filing that your wife, Elena, contributed negligible value to Thorn Dynamics and therefore deserves only the minimum statutory settlement. Is that correct?" Julian leaned back, checking his watch. "Elena was a great mother," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "She ran the house. She hosted the parties. But the company, the tech, that was me. That was always me. I spent the late nights coding. I took the risks." Elena kept her face completely neutral, hands folded in her lap. "So," Sarah continued, flipping through a binder, "you are stating, for the record, that Elena Vance had no hand in the creation of the core algorithms that Thorn Dynamics is built upon." "None," Julian laughed dismissively. "She doesn't even know Python from Java. She's an artist at heart, not an engineer. I built the Sentinel code. It's my intellectual property." Elena's eyes flickered up, locking onto Julian's. He mistook her intensity for hurt feelings. He didn't realize he had just walked into the trap. "Let's talk about the Sentinel code," Sarah said, pulling out a document. "This is the original patent filing from 14 years ago. The code is proprietary. It is the foundation of your entire fortune, correct?" "Yes," Julian said, annoyed. "Why are we talking about tech history?" "Because," Sarah said, her voice hardening, "you just claimed under oath that you wrote it. But we have logs from the original development server. We also have a notarized partnership agreement from 2010, signed by you, stating that the Sentinel source code was provided by Elena Vance as her capital contribution to the marriage and the business partnership. Julian froze. He blinked, the arrogance slipping for a fraction of a second. That was just paperwork. For tax purposes. She didn't actually write it. Mr. Vance, Sarah pressed, leaning forward. If you claim she didn't write it, you are admitting to fraud on the original patent application. If you admit she did write it, then per the intellectual property clause in your prenuptial agreement, which triggers in the event of infidelity, she retains ownership of the source code. The room went deadly silent. Julian looked at his lead lawyer, who had suddenly gone very pale. They had prepared for a battle over alimony and house prices. They had not prepared for a battle over the ownership of the company's DNA. Julian looked at Elena, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He didn't see the housewife he had discarded. He saw the brilliant coder he had met in grad school, the woman whose genius he had cannibalized to build his empire. You wouldn't, Julian whispered. Elena finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. I didn't want to, Julian. I was happy to let you be the face while I was the foundation. But when you try to tear down the foundation, the whole house falls. The final day of the trial felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a surgical extraction. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with the hum of whispers. Julian sat slumped in his chair, the confident posture from the deposition completely evaporated. He looked like a man trying to solve a puzzle while the pieces were actively burning in his hands. Outside, the paparazzi were already swarming. Sienna was there, positioned strategically near the entrance, wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed innocent bystander. She was smiling for the cameras, likely drafting the victory tweet in her head. She expected a settlement that would leave Julian with the company and Elena with a check just big enough to make her go away. Inside, however, the reality was starkly different. Your Honor, Sarah, Elena's lawyer, addressed the judge, her voice cutting through the tension. We have established that the Sentinel source code, the engine that runs Thorn Dynamics, is the sole intellectual property of Elena Vance. We have also established, through the forensic accounting of Mr. Hideo, that Mr. Vance attempted to defraud the marital estate by hiding assets in the Cayman Islands. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for theatrics, peered over her glasses at Julian. Mr. Vance, your counsel has not been able to refute the server logs or the timestamps on the original code. The prenuptial agreement is explicit. In the event of infidelity, the license granting the company use of this code is revoked unless a new agreement is reached. Julian's lawyer stood up, his hands shaking slightly. Your Honor, revoking the license would bankrupt the company. It would put thousands of employees out of work. It is a nuclear option. Elena stood up then. She didn't look at the judge, she looked at Julian. It's not a nuclear option, she said calmly. It's a system reset. Julian, you built the walls, but I own the ground they stand on. You can keep the title of CEO. You can keep the magazine covers. But if you want the company to survive, you have to buy the ground from me. The terms were brutal. To keep the rights to the software and avoid a complete shutdown of Thorn Dynamics, Julian had to concede 75% of his voting shares and personal assets to Elena. He also had to liquidate Project Horizon, his secret offshore account, and transfer the funds immediately to the marital pot for division. Julian looked at Elena, his eyes pleading. He realized too late that Sienna loved the CEO of Thorn Dynamics, not Julian the man. If he lost the company, he lost Sienna too. I agree, Julian whispered, his voice cracking. The gavel banged. It wasn't just a legal ruling, it was the sound of an empire changing hands. Julian retained his title, but he was now essentially an employee in a company owned by the wife he had betrayed. He had traded his partner for a PR strategy, and the strategy had just failed. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse swung open. The flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust into the air like spears. They were shouting questions, hungry for the drama of a scorned woman. Elena, is it true you took half? Are you angry? What did you say to the mistress? Sienna, who had been posing near the bottom of the steps, stepped forward, a practiced sympathetic smile on her face, ready to steal the spotlight. She expected Elena to come out crying, or perhaps looking vengeful. She expected a scene. Instead, Elena emerged looking light. She wore a simple, structured navy dress. She didn't hide her face behind sunglasses. She paused at the top of the stairs, looking down at the chaos with the same analytical detachment she used to debug code. Sienna's smile faltered. She looked past Elena to see Julian stumbling out behind her. He looked aged, defeated, and pale. He didn't walk toward Sienna, he walked past her, ignoring her outstretched hand, moving straight to his waiting car with his head down. The reporters sensed the shift. The story wasn't wife gets paid. The story was king dethroned. A reporter from the Financial Times managed to get close to Elena. Mrs. Vance, you've just become the majority shareholder of one of the world's biggest tech firms. What is your comment on the victory? Did you do this for revenge? Elena stopped. The crowd went silent, waiting for the soundbite. Revenge is an inefficient use of energy, Elena said, her voice clear and carrying over the crowd. I didn't take the company to hurt anyone. I took it because I built it. For a long time, I let someone else put their name on my work because I thought love was a partnership. I learned that business is business. She glanced briefly at Sienna, who was now standing alone, realized and irrelevant, on the sidewalk. I didn't win a divorce, Elena added, turning back to the cameras. I corrected an accounting error. The books are now balanced. Elena walked down the steps, past the stunned reporters, and into a waiting black sedan. She didn't look back. In the years that followed, Elena Vance didn't just fade away with her billions. She launched the Vance Initiative, a global incubator dedicated to funding women in STEM who, like her, had the genius but not the platform. She became a titan in her own right, stepping out of the shadows to lead the industry she had quietly shaped for decades. Julian remained CEO in name, but everyone knew who pulled the strings. And Sienna. She moved on quickly when the money tightened, proving Elena's calculations correct once again. Elena had proven that while you can steal a man, and you can steal credit, you can never steal the mind that created the magic. That belonged to her. Always. Life lesson: your greatest asset is never the money in your bank account or the partner on your arm. It is your own competence and resilience. Money can be spent and partners can leave, but your ability to rebuild, create, and succeed is something that belongs only to you.